We will begin the second day with the keynote speak of Mr. Professor İlhan Tekeli.
Sayın Profesör İlhan Tekeli.
Değerli misafirler, sevgili hanımefendiler, beyefendiler.
Guests, ladies and gentlemen.
Zirvemizin ikinci günü birazdan başlayacak.
The second day
birkaç
of our
dakika
summit
içinde.
is about to start in a couple of minutes.
Profesör Doktor İlhan Tekeli'nin keynote konuşmasını dinleyeceğiz.
Will deliver a keynote speech.
Yerlerinizi almanızı rica ediyoruz.
Please be seated.
Anlayışınız için teşekkürler.
Thank you for your understanding.
Once again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honorable mayors, dear guests from Turkey and abroad. Welcome to the second day of the very first meeting of B40, Balkan Cities Network. Yesterday was a very fruitful and exciting day. As moderating summits such as this for almost like 10 years, I have to say that it's been my first time to see so engaging audience and mayors and delegations so eager to collaborate and share ideas. We heard many valuable opinions and contributions, and I am pleased to say that today's program is also very rich and fulfilling. We will start with the keynote speak of Professor İlhan Tekeli from Middle East Technical University. He is renowned social scientist, sociologist, and urban and regional planner. So now I would like to leave the floor to Professor Tekeli to give his speech. The floor is yours.
Buyurun efendim, söz sizde.
Çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much. Well, today I've structured my speech like that. The title of my speech is "A democracy befitting human dignity can only be built locally. You cannot build a democracy centrally." Well, this is a thesis that I propose here, and I will try to formulate it here.
Yapılacağını bana haber veren
When I was communicated that this meeting would be held, my colleagues and my friends asked me to deliver a speech on democracy.
Benim de çok sevdiğim ve bizim de çok
Well, this is a topic that I really like to talk about, and this is something that we urgently need. So it was a great pleasure for me to accept this proposal. Establishing a network for Balkan cities. It's a great initiative, actually. For years, I've been involved in municipal activities, and with this capacity that I have, I am truly aware of its importance because we are in a society of networks at the moment. This is the era that we have, and the Balkans have cities that are quite close to one another, and these cities establishing networks like that, it's something that we need to appreciate. And I would like to congratulate all my colleagues and friends who have taken the initiative to do so. But this speech, well, I am delivering this speech at the moment. Well, Balkan cities share a similar culture. We're in the same part of the world, but I'm not going to talk about the proximities and similarities that we have. We all know the similarities that we have, but I would like to touch upon what we need to achieve together. What we need to achieve together is actually democracy. And in particular, I believe that democracy is something that local administrations should embrace. Can a democracy be possible if it's built centrally? I have doubts about that. There's nothing interesting, though. We're talking about human rights here. Well, in 1948, for example, a charter was ratified, signed, and there is this understanding of human rights that we've had since then. And one of the most fundamental rights that we have is the right to life. But the UN documents do not only indicate the right to life. It's actually the right to life with dignity. And the part with dignity is quite important, because this is what we need to achieve. Indeed, providing people with the right to life with dignity. How to do that, or how to actually achieve it collectively. This is important. The right to life with dignity, actually, democracy pops up in our minds, because without democracy we can't really talk about the right to life with dignity. But what do we really understand by democracy? Well, we are actually talking about something right when we say democracy, but we're not really precise here. And to put it forward precisely and clearly, we need to discuss about it. We need to talk about it. We need to understand one another on the very subject of democracy. And this is what I'm trying to do, actually. The right to a decent life, and how to actually do it in the democracies that we're trying to build. Well, today, we all know that we have representative democracy, and this is the ruling understanding for democracy that we have. Representative democracy is actually an instrumental democracy. And this type of democracy does not necessarily involve a program for democracy. This is actually a facilitated method of holding power. This is what we actually have in terms of representative democracy. Well, representative democracy is a tool in two dimensions. The first is actually about how to hold the power or come to the ruling positions. This is a roadmap. And the second is actually about the legitimacy of how decisions are made and taken. And there's something interesting here. We're talking about the majority of votes, and the majority of votes is the core of legitimacy, but we're not necessarily questioning that. Well, the majority of votes, what kind of an assumption does it have, really, for us to establish this concept of legitimacy? And there is this interesting assumption underlying that, and this is about people in societies, and they are atomistic individuals, and they exist without being affected by one another, or their satisfaction with life can be attained individually. This is the assumption that we have in front of us. So, isolated individuals and their legitimacies, and the arithmetic cumulative of that, and it actually needs to pass 50%. This is the assumption that we have. But to what extent it reflects the truth and the facts? Are individuals really atomistic people? And their quality of life? Their quality of life, is it only based on their hedonistic consumptions? When we ask this question, this is not really true. This does not really reflect the truth, because individuals aren't like that. People aren't like that. What represents individuals and humans? Anthropology, for example, let's have a look at it. Well, individuals aren't necessarily standalone items. They exist in relation to one another, according to anthropology. And only to the extent that they are in relation to one another. How do we really spot the position of representative democracy then?
İşte bu soruyu sorduğumuz zaman
When we ask this question,
demokrasinin kaynağının
the root of
bir
representative
insana
democracy,
ilişkin bir varsayımdan kaynaklandığını,
it is related with an assumption on human beings. This is what we're asking, and this is the point when we understand that it doesn't reflect the truth.
şöyle bir soru ortaya çıkıyor.
Another question pops up.
Bu ilişki içinde insanların demokrasisi nasıl olabilir?
How can the democracy of these people be when they're in relation to one another? We know that actually, but we can't actually achieve it in practice because this is participatory democracy.
Pratikte bunu
In
ne
practice,
kadar
to
gerçekleştirebiliriz?
what extent can we actually attain it? To what extent can we achieve it?
İlginçtir.
Interesting
Burada karşımıza bir soru ortaya çıkıyor.
that we have a
Bizim
question here.
anayasalarımız
Our constitutions,
hepsi
they're all
atomistik birey üstüne
based on standalone individuals.
temsil biçimi olarak da
And in terms of
bireyler ve
representation,
toplum diye iki kademeli
there are
temsil
two
biçimine göre
categories, individuals and societies. And this is how
bu
constitutions are
anayasaların
formulated.
içinde
And
katılımcı
within these
demokrasinin
constitutions,
açıkça bir meşruiyet
there
temeli
is
yok.
not really a basis for the legitimacy of representative democracy. However, the lawmakers
Alternatif bir anayasa ilişki içinde
propose
insanın
an alternative
anayasasının
constitution.
nasıl olması gerektiğini
How
tartışmıyorlar.
they're not actually discussing that. How should a constitution be established for individuals who are in relation to one another? Today, we're discussing constitution, and the only constitution they're discussing is actually the constitution of people who are standalone individuals. I'm not a lawmaker. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know what really cooks in their kitchen. Maybe they have this understanding of participatory democracy. Maybe there are those people who basically cook
Şöyle bir
the dish
soruya
of
gel-
participatory democracy in their own respective fields. But there is one question that I'd also like to ask
Bu
here.
temsili demokrasinin
Participatory, pardon me, a representative democracy, what are the confines of it,
nasıl azaltılacak?
and how to actually tackle the limitations and the confines of representative
derslerimde
democracy?
Bir okuma listemde bir
In my lectures, there is a
yazı var.
reading list, and there is
Orta
one
Doğu ülkeleri
paper.
için yazılmış.
It's a paper on the Middle
Diyor
East
ki,
countries,
Demokrat olmayanların
those
demokrasisi,
who aren't Democrats, and the democracy of those people who aren't Democrats,
temsili demokrasi,
says the paper. So representative
sizin
democracy,
iktidar olmanız için demokrat olmanız
you
gerekmiyor.
don't really have to be a Democrat for you to hold the ruling position. When you get the majority of the votes,
İktidara gelebiliyorsunuz.
you can actually come to
Ve
power.
iktidar
And
sıfır toplamlı bir oyun.
the power
Yani
is a game. The ruling position is a game. When we're talking about this, it's a zero-sum game. So they can't do it, I'll do it instead. This is bad, I'm good instead. This is the general understanding, and this is a marginalizing discourse that we see. And within this discourse and rhetoric that the power is held and attained, and the entire public sphere,
sıfır toplamlı oyunun sonucunda
as a result of this zero-sum game, is quite desegregated, segregated, and marginalized. With this understanding, those individuals who aren't Democrats have a democracy. This is an oxymoron, though. This is an oxymoron, and this is the concept that we have. In fact, what do? We actually organize democratic elections, but what do we really elect? The dictator till the next round of elections. This is what we elect.
Demokratiklik
And this
taşıyan seçimler
claim of democracy or being democratic,
diktatörünü seçmiş oluyor.
we are somehow electing the dictator till the next round. This is what we do.
Ne oluyor?
In this case, what happens?
Kapalı kapılar altında
Behind
iktidar
closed
olanlar
doors, those people who have the power the rulers
demokratik meşruiyete sahip olduğunu varsayıyorlar.
assume that whatever they do has
Demokratik
a legitimate and democratic reason.
alınan oyla iktidar olmakla
Well, democratic
oluşmuyor.
legitimacy doesn't
kararın
really
verilmesinde
spring
sağlayıp
from
başarılacak
having attained the
demokrasiyle.
majority of votes.
Şimdi
Well, now,
bu konuyu daha ilerletmek istemiyorum.
I don't want to go
Ama
much in
böyle
detail
bir
here,
demokrasi içinde
but within such a
iktidar
democracy,
olanların verdiği kararlar,
the rulers
kapalı
and the
kapılar
decisions that
ardında
they
şeffaf
take
olmayan, hesap
behind closed
verilemeyen
doors,
kararlar
those decisions that aren't accountable, that aren't
yaratıyor?
transparent,
Bir demokrasi
what do they
açığı
cause? They cause actually a
Demokrasi
huge
açığı dediğim
gap
şey,
in democracy. What I mean by this gap in
talepleriyle
democracy, this is
kamusal
about the demands of individual and
arasında
the
üst
public
üste
authority.
düşmeyiş
So this
bir
is
demokrasi
actually a disagreement between the demands of individuals and the deeds of public authorities. And this gap in democracy, I'll talk about that till the end of my speech, because it's quite a fruitful concept indeed.
Yalnız şunu söylemek
But
isterim.
there's one thing I'd like to touch upon here.
Evet. Temsili demokrasi kötüye
Well, yes, representative
kullanılabilir.
democracy, this is something that can be abused when I talk about it, when I describe it like
Demokrat
this.
kişiler
But
temsili
Democrats
demokrasiyi az demokrasi açığı yaratacak şekilde de kullanır.
make use of representative democracy in a manner to tackle this gap.
Niye temsili demokrasi var?
Because
Elimizde
we have representative democracy
sürekliliği
because
olan,
this
anayasaları
is
kurulmuş
something that has
bir
continuity,
alternatif
that has
demokrasi yok.
constitutions,
O
and we
zaman
don't have any alternative
biz
to that.
temsili demokrasi
In this
içinde
case, within the
demokrasiyi,
representative democracy,
açığını
we need to tackle the gap and
uygulamaları
shortcomings in
yapabilmemiz
democracies.
gerekiyor.
And we need to
yapmak
develop
için
practices to this end.
Çalışan
And for us to
tabii
do that,
siyasetçiler var.
there are
Birçok
politicians who are involved in this endeavor.
bu
Many,
demin
many
sözünü
politicians
ettiğim
that we
temsili
have
demokrasinin kötüye kullanılmasının farkında.
are aware
Bunun için
of
de
how representative democracy is
iyileştirme yolu var.
misused. This is fine. They're
İyileştirme
seeking
yolunda
ways to improve it.
Bu anayasaya yazılmamış olsa da
Although it's not
iyileştirme
really
pratik
anticipated
içinde
in the
iki
Constitution,
kanaldan
they have
sağlanır.
practices aimed at improvement,
Bu
and
iki
there are two
kanaldan
channels
birisi
through which they improve the situation.
Toplumun
One of the channels
stratejik önemi olan konularında
is
halkın
about the
katılımını açık,
strategic
şeffaf,
topics for
hesap
society,
vermekten kaçmayan
transparent
karar
and
süreçlerini
accountable
hayata
decision-making
geçiriyor.
processes and implementation
Bir
of that.
anlamda,
This is one of the channels.
son zamanlarda dediğim yine bir
Well,
20 yıl
recently, well,
falan önce
when I say
başlayarak
recently, I'm talking about
biz bir
2
kavram
decades ago.
kullanmaya
We started to
yönetim
use a
kavramı
concept.
yerine yönetişim
Rather
kavramı
than
kullanmaya başladık.
administration, we've started to
Yönetişim
use the term
işte
governance.
bunu
So
sağlamaya
governance
çalışıyor.
is something that is aimed at
Ama bir
this.
başka daha var.
But there is
Yalnız
one other thing that we
temsili
need to focus on.
Demokrasi açığını
Well, representative democracy, and to tackle the gap in the
tek
democracy
yol,
that it causes.
yönetişim,
And the only way
kurumsallaşmaları sağlamak değil.
isn't governance and institutionalization of these governance
Sivil
structures.
toplum kurumlarına
The second channel
kamusal
is
özne
to
olma
do
yolunu açmak.
with
Çeşitliliği,
civil society organizations and how to actually provide a chance for them to be
eğer bir
public
tek kamusal
entities.
otorite varsa,
Because if there is only one public authority, and if it is the only public authority that guides the way, that shows the way,
noktanın istekleri yerine geliyor demektir.
in this
Bütün
case, only the requests of certain circles are
demokrasi
addressed.
açığıyla dolacak.
In this case, the gap will widen. So to tackle that, to address that, civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations should have a way to become public entities and public
Ne
subjects.
kadar yaptığım sunumda
And in my
şunu
presentation,
yapmaya çalıştım.
I
Temsili bugün
was trying to do the following.
Dünyada hakim olan temsili demokrasi pratiğinin
Representative democracy and the
içinde
practices of
bulunduğu
representative democracy
kullanma
are
yollarını
being abused at the moment in the world. And I wanted to talk about this, and I also wanted to talk about how practices that are more democratic can be attained. But this is basically the second best solution.
Acaba bunu aşabilir
But I
miyiz?
wonder if we can actually overcome that.
Daha iyi.
Can we attain something better than
Bu
the
soruyu
second best?
soracağım konuşmamın
I'm going
bundan
to
sonraki
ask
kısmında.
this question in the
Bu soruyu sormak
remainder
için
of my speech. And for me to
belediye
present this
başkanlarımız
question,
var,
well, we
onlar
have mayors with us
siyasetçiler.
at the moment, they're
Şöyle
politicians.
bir soruyu
But
soracağım.
there is one thing that I'd like
Bir
to ask here.
siyasetçi niye siyasetçi olur?
Why does a politician become a politician?
Nasıl bir doyum sağlar?
What kind of a satisfaction do they derive from
Ve
it?
acaba
And I wonder
alternatif doyum sağlayan siyasetçiler
if
alternatif
politicians who
siyasetçi
derive alternative
biçimleri
satisfaction
ortaya
from it
çıkartabilir mi?
can
Ve bunların demokrasi bakımından
make sure that
anlamları
alternative
neler?
forms of democracy can be attained, and what does it really mean for the sake of democracy?
Birinci tür, yani burada tabii
Well, for sure,
değişik alternatifler
we're
var ama
talking
buradaki
about different
tartışmayı
alternatives
çok
here, but
uzatmamak
I
için
don't really
iki
want
tür
to take much of your
siyasetçiden
time in this discussion, so I'd like to talk about two forms of politics
iki tür
here,
siyasetçi bir
or
anlamda
two
demin
forms of
sözünü
politicians
ettiğim,
here. And
iki tür insan var
I cited this
sayımına da
before.
tekabül ediyor.
It also coincides with
Atomistik
the
bireyler varsayımı
assumption
üstünden
that standalone individuals are what make up a society versus looking at societies as
doyumları nasıl farklıdır?
composed of individuals who are in relation to one another. So if they have different assumptions, what kind of practices would
Siyaset
they carry
hangi
out?
koşullarda bir
politics,
siyasetçinin yaşamına
Under
anlam
what
katmaktadır?
circumstances does it really add a meaning to a politician's
Genellikle
life?
denilebilir ki
There's one thing that we can say.
insanlar
Here.
genelde
Individuals, humans, I mean,
yönetilmekten hoşnut değiller.
aren't really satisfied with being administered or governed. They don't really like being governed.
İnsanlar yönetilmeye razı olurlar.
They consent to it.
Razı olmak meselesi
So consent,
nasıl gerçekleşir?
how does it really take place?
Bu iki soru
These two
aslında
questions
birbirini tamamlayan sorular.
are somehow complementing one
Birinci
another.
türdeki siyasetçi
The first
içinde yaşadığı
politician,
siyasetçi var.
the first type of politician, imagine a
Genellikle
politician,
atomistik
well, their
bireylerden oluşan
assumption
bir toplum
of
olarak
society
bakıyor.
is based on
Ve
standalone
diyor ki bu
individuals,
siyasetçi
and they
hem
say,
kendisi buna inanıyor.
well, this is one thing that they believe in, and
kendisini
they
böyle
are
sunuyor.
actually portraying themselves to a particular society in this manner.
Ben
And they say,
toplumumu çok seviyorum.
I truly admire my
Ben
society.
aynı zamanda bir bilen kişi.
But at the same time, I'm a
Ve
person
toplum için iyi
who
olanın
knows,
ne olduğunu
who
biliyorum.
knows what's best for
Ve
society.
toplumun
And
bugünkü yerinden başka bir yerine nasıl taşınacağını
I also know how to carry this society from
Ve
one place to
siyasete
another,
onun için
from one
giriyorum.
point to another. And this is why I take part in
Demokrasi
politics.
ise
As
onun
for
için
democracy,
o isteklerini yerine getirmesi için
it actually
yararlanacağı, onu
serves
iktidara
as a tool,
taşıyacak bir
as an
araç.
instrument that this politician
Bunun
would utilize to
Yalnız
attain
iktidara taşımayacak.
its goals. And it's not
Programını
only
koyduğu
going to be
içinde
something that will carry
bu programına
this person
meşruiyet
to the ruling position. This will also provide legitimacy
İkinci tür
to
siyasetçi
his agenda.
böyle düşünmüyor.
The second type of politicians
Onun
wouldn't really think like
toplumu
that.
için
For
iyi
their
bildiği
society,
iddiası yok.
They don't really
O
claim
topluma
that they know what's best for
stressiz,
their society.
İnsan onurunu ön
A
plana alan,
stress-free,
halkla birlikte
society
toplumun
with a
belirli
great
bir
focus
yöne doğru
on human
ilerlemesini
dignity,
sağlayan
a society
bir
headed
gelişme,
towards a
iç
certain
dinamiği.
progress.
Bu
So
toplumun
this is an
içinden
internal
doğan bir
dynamics
iç dinamiği
that basically
toplumla
springs
birlikte
from the
geliştirmek
society
için
itself.
siyaset yapmak.
So this is why the first politician takes part in
Öneriler
politics,
ulaşılacak
according to
bir
their
yer
claims.
değil.
So in a way,
Birlikte
this is not something to
yapılacak bir
attain.
yolculuk.
This is actually a journey to take
Siyasetçinin
together.
insana verdiği
So
bir şey yok.
there is not really something that the politician
bir
gives to
yolculuk
individuals. This is actually a proposal for a journey together. What does it really mean?
Onlara onurlu yaşam öneri.
It's actually a proposal for a decent life, a life with dignity.
Bunlardan birinci türü
And the first type of
geleceğe ilişkin bir umut
politicians
yaratmak istiyor.
would like to create a hope for the future. So there are two types of politicians and their strategies for holding the ruling position.
Birincisi siyasetçi
The first politician
bunu yapıyor.
would do the following.
Diyor ki
They would say,
sen bana oy ver. Ben
Vote
iktidar olayım.
for me.
Seni iyi
Let
yere
me
getireceğim. Genellikle bu
have the ruling
siyasetçi
position and I'll carry you to a better place,
program
they'd
da
say.
önermiyor.
And they don't really offer any programs or
umut.
schedules.
skeci, bir bulutsuz
Rather,
bir umut
they create
kavramı ortaya
a
koyuyor.
cloud, a sketch for hope. This is what they put forward.
Bireylerinin
And all the individuals within a society
kendi akıllarıyla doldurmasını
start
sağlamaya çalışıyor.
filling in the meaning
Yahu,
of this hope that is
daha
proposed
çalışkansa,
or put forward.
daha bir modernistse
But if it's more
bir
hardworking,
program öneriyor.
if it's more modernist, let's say, they'd put forward a program.
Biliyorsunuz, şöyle bir hikaye
And
var.
there is this narrative in Turkey, as you would know,
İnsanlar genellikle muhalefete
rulers
şöyle derler.
would
Bir program
turn to the
öner,
opposition and
çözüm
say,
öner vesaire.
come up with a solution, come up with a program or agenda, they'd say. So this kind of perspective being based on standalone individuals, and this is the perspective that they have for the elections too. And
Bu bakış açısında
such a perspective,
program
such a
üstünden
viewpoint
yahut
is based on the
yarattığı
program or based on the
umudun yarattığı
agenda
illüzyon üstünden
and the
iktidar
illusion
olmaya
that is created by hope. And this is how they'd like to attain the ruling position.
İkinci türde
But the second
siyasetçi ise
form of politicians or type
farklı
of
bir şey
politicians,
söylüyor halka.
they say something
Birlikte
else to the public,
gerçekleştirilecek bir
something
yeni
to be
yaşam
attained
biçimi
collectively, a
oluşturmakta,
new way of life,
başka bir deyişle
creating it together.
yeni
In other
bir
words,
toplumsal
a new
oluşturmakta
social dynamic and
bir
creation
ortaklık rolü
of it.
önermek.
And actually, they offer
Pozisyon,
a position
bireye
of partnership
yaratıcılık
to
pozisyonu vererek
individuals. So this
bireyin
is
yaşamını
something,
onurlu bir yaşam
this is a
haline
chance for
getirmek.
individuals to be creative. And this turns
birinci
life
türdeki
into a more decent life. And the first type of politicians
halkın yaşam kalitesine ilişkin
as for the quality of life
doyum kavramının
and the concept of
bireysel
satisfaction
tüketime
in
dayalı
this life
hedonik bir kavram
is
olduğu
somehow
varsayımı
based
üstünden
on
yaklaşıyor.
hedonistic consumption. This is the assumption that they pursue. And the second type of
Başarının
politicians
tüketim üstünden değil,
would
birlikte
make sure that
başarılanın
success isn't based on consumption, but rather
heyecanın
it is
ortak
based on the
bölüşülmesinin
shared
sağladığı doyum
excitement
üstünden
of achieving something together. This is shared satisfaction
yaklaşım.
that they offer.
Aslında bu ikinci türde
In the second
demokratik
type of
olarak verilen de
what is given
karar
democratically, I mean,
olmaktan çıkıyor.
what is
Demokratinin
made
gerçekleştirdiği
democratic manner is not
yaşam
a decision
biçimi oluyor.
anymore because it's the lifestyle
Burada
perpetuated
karar
through democracy.
yaşam biçiminden bağımsız bir
So
şey
the
değil.
lifestyle is
Yaşam
not
biçimine
independent
yedirilmiş bir kavram.
of the way that we live in here.
Şimdi,
the decision and the lifestyles are very
bu
much integrated
tartışmadan
into one
sonra
another from in this
esas
perspective. So following this discussion,
tartışacağım
I would like
konuya
to move
geliyorum.
on with the real
O
topic
da
of today's
yönetimde
speech, and it is
merkez
as
ve
follows.
yerel arasındaki iş bölümünün
the cooperation
demokrasi
between the central
sorunsalına
and
nasıl
decentral
yansıdığı.
management and its
Şimdi
repercussions
demokrasi
on the
konusunda
issue
böyle
of
bir
democracy.
tartışma yaptıktan
Well, now
sonra
that we have discussed all these issues around
şimdiye kadar
democracy, now it
tartışmamın
is
bu bölümüne
time
kadar
to
ele almadığım iki konuya
move on with two
ele
different
alacağım.
subjects.
Birisi
First and
mekan
foremost,
boyutu,
we will go into
ikincisi
the
ise
issue of
ölçek boyutu.
space, and secondly we will go into
Yönetimin
scale.
yahut
Space and
demokrasinin
scale are what we're going to
ölçeği
look into.
ve
So the
mekanla
space
ilişkisi.
of democracy and the scale of democracy is what we're going
Mekan
to look
boyutunu
into.
ve ölçek boyutunu
Well,
aslında çok basit bir şekilde analize katacağım.
I will be analyzing all those issues in a very simple manner. So if there is a certain country and if this country has some management issues, then the rational way to tackle this issue is to have cooperation between the central and decentral,
Acaba
local, so to speak. So what is the rationale behind this cooperation, and within this understanding, where does democracy stand?
burada bir parantez açayım.
Let me open up a parenthesis in here.
Burada tartışmamı sürdürmem merkez ve yerel iş bölümü.
So my discussion
Ama bu
goes into the central and decentral aspect of democracy. However, there is one way to open up this issue. The European Union
multi-level governance diye bir kavramı var.
has come up with a concept entitled Multilateral Governance.
Merkez ve
And
yerel iş bölümünün daha rafine bir şekilde
this is a
ele
refined version of the relationship between central and decentral. And the main
subsidiarity denilen
topic is
yerinden
subsidiarity.
Avrupa
And this is
Birliği'ndeki bu iş bölümünü belirleyen
about the cooperation
karşımıza bir
in the
çok
European
kademeli
Union,
bir yönetişim
and subsidiarity brings up a certain issue, a multi-level issue. Subsidiarity
merkezin
is a highly important
aşırı
topic,
toplayıp
and once the central
kötüye
government
merkezin kötüye
gathers
kullanılmasını
all its
engelleyecek
forces
bir
and
lider demek.
abuses the governance, then subsidiarity might be of avail, of use for us. But I won't be using subsidiarity, and I will go on with the dichotomy between the central and decentral in my speech.
Böyle bir karşıtlığı kabul ettiğimizde merkez ve yerel
So when
karşıtlığı
we
kabul
accept such a
ettiğimizde
dichotomy between the central and decentral,
şöyle bir durumla karşı
then
karşıyayız. Merkezi
comes up the
yönetimler
following issue. The central governments
çok güçlü bir vesayet
might have dominance over the decentralized or local governments, but on what
meşruiyeti nereden
claim?
kaynaklanıyor? Bunu tartışıyoruz.
How can they go for it? Where does their legitimacy come from?
Hangi noktadan
And what
sonra
is the
bu
boundary?
vesayet talebi meşruiyetin sınırları dışına çıkmış olur?
How can they make this claim legitimate?
Biliyorsunuz bir Avrupa
Where does this
yerel
guardianship, the
yönetimi
right to
önemli
guardianship come from?
Türkiye'de bunu
As you may imagine,
sağlamış durumda.
Turkey is already a signatory of a European document. However, Turkey has not accepted the articles around guardianship of this European document.
Buna çekince korkar.
Well,
Bunun
as Turkey makes a reservation around the articles on guardianship, is there a certain rationality behind it? We should ask ourselves these questions. If we are to discuss the rationality or non-rationality of this understanding, we have to go into the theory behind this decision. We may argue that the national states
genelde yerindelik, yerindenlik yani subsidiarity
do
ilkesine ters
abide,
düşecek şekilde
do not abide
gerekli
by the
olmayan
subsidiarity
birçok
principle,
konuda
and
yetkiyi kendisinde
the central
toplamak
government
eğilimindedirler.
tends to gather all the forces.
Demokrasinin
Therefore,
kalitesini
the
geliştirmek
quality of
isteyen
democracy
ülkeler,
may be
yaptıkları yerel
improved
yönetim
through the
reformlarında
local government
genellikle ne
reforms.
yapmaktadırlar? Merkezin yetkilerini azaltmakta,
So the
yerelin yetkilerini artırmaktadır.
decentralized government or local government is further strengthened through devolution.
Aslında merkezin yetkisini kötüye kullanmasının tek yolu
So the only way for the center to abuse its power is not through
alternatif
getting
yolları var. Bugün Türkiye'de
over
bunu gayet net
rights. There
olarak
are some
görüyoruz.
alternative ways, and we can easily experience this case in today's Turkey. The central government in Turkey,
Bir öğrencimin yaptığı
well, one of my
beyefendi
students
22
wrote a
merkezi
thesis.
kuruluşu
There are 22 decentralized institutions, and those institutions do have their own working principles, and they are independent of the central government. In relation to the central government, there are some local exercises, and let me tell you what the conclusion is. Well, the center and the central government and the local government, if the central government and the local government are controlled by the same party, then we won't see any problems. However, if the central government and the local government are controlled by two parties, the central government
merkezi hükümet
may
belediyeye
exert power
alternatif bir belediye olarak
on the municipality, and the central government might even set up an alternative municipality. The most interesting example
Kocaoğlu zamanında
was experienced in Aziz Kocaoğlu period in Izmir. For instance, the office of Prime Ministry was opened up in Izmir when Aziz Kocaoğlu served for the local government. So what kind of an ethical issue does it bring up?
kendisini
Well,
iktidara
the
getiren
power
oylara saygı duymak.
does and should respect
Ama
the people
muhalefetin
who have
oylarına
voted for them. However, it is clear that the government does not respect the votes for the opposition.
bu
So this
haksızlık ilginç
stance
bir
towards the votes
demokrasi problematiği.
has brought up an interesting democracy issue.
Demokrasinin meşruiyeti konusunda
So the legitimacy of
inandığım
democracy
temel ögeyi çifte standart olarak değerlendiriyoruz.
is not abided by through this understanding. And there is a double standard imposed by the central government in this
Şöyle bir
way.
soru soracağım.
So given the point that we have reached, my question
Merkezi
will be as
yönetimle
follows.
yerel yönetim
The central
arasındaki
government,
iş
between the
bölümü
central
ve
government and
karşılıklı
local government,
ilişkilerin mantığını nasıl saptayabiliriz?
what should be the cooperation between the central and local government? Well, of course, we need a certain cooperation. However, the central government and the local government
Uygun
should
bölümü nasıl sağlanır?
have an appropriate cooperation in place. How can we have it? We may argue that
Bunun için
in an attempt to have this cooperation, we should ask ourselves what the center is about and what the local is about, first and foremost. And within this discussion,
mantığını bulalım.
the rationale behind the cooperation should be revealed. Well, local is paramount. First and foremost, I must note that local is paramount. The information of the local and the information of the central government are totally different from one another.
Farklı nitelikte.
The quality of information is definitely different.
Çerçeve olur.
Local might offer us a perspective
Fiziki
from two
bir çerçeve, bir
points of view.
ilişkisi görmesi,
First and
yaşadığımız
foremost,
yer, doğal özellikleriyle
the place that we live in
yer aldığımız
and the space
yapılarla,
that we occupy, the buildings that we live in,
her uyandığımızda
are all about the local. When we wake up,
nesnelerin nerede olduğunu biliriz.
we know where the physical
Yaşamımıza onlar yön verirler.
materials are. They guide our life. We are very much accustomed to where we live. We have some common life experiences. We have face-to-face relations.
Komünikasyon ilişkisinin ötesinde bir
It goes beyond the communication.
mesajlar değil.
It's not about the messages. It's about the emotions. We exchange feelings and emotions
Yerelde
with the local. We get socialized within the local. And
içine gireriz.
we are in relationship with the local, and these relationships do make more meaningful, and we exist through these relationships. The humanitarian values
Yaşam içinde burada.
find a life through the local.
İnsan hakları,
The rights of human beings
insan hakları bildirgesinde yazılı bir metin değil.
is not just a text that we read in the Universal Rights of Declaration. We materialize those rights within the local.
Bireyle çevresi bütünleşir.
The individual becomes one with his or her surroundings, and it becomes a part of our identity.
Günümüzde yerel dediğimizde onu bir
In today's
karşıtlığına
era,
göre tanımlıyoruz.
The local
Yerel küresel olanın
has a
ulusal
certain
merkezi
definition.
olanın karşıtı.
Local is against the global, and the global
Ulusal
is,
olanda
and the local
somut üzerinden bilinemez.
cannot be known
Ancak yereli
in a
somut
rational manner. We can only get information through local
küresel olanda,
in a more clear way.
ulusal olanda
The global
imaj,
and the
kapital
local
ve mal akımlarının mekanıdır.
are also
Bu
the
akımlar
spaces
yerele
of
sızdığında onu
flow,
dönüştürme eğilimini
and
taşırlar.
these flows might change the local.
Bir üç yol
From this
ağzına,
perspective, we have three
bu yol
paths to follow.
ayrımlarından biri,
And one of the ways that we may follow,
tabii yol ayrımı dediğimiz
Well,
zaman
what I mean is that
yanlış yapma potansiyelinin bulunduğu yerde.
there are three ways that we may follow, and this understanding of parting of the ways is kind of problematic because we might make mistakes. Well, we have three paths to follow. The first path that we may follow
Akımların, imajların vesairenin yarattığı dönüşüme
is
teslim olmak.
giving up to the transformation created by the external elements. The local, in this way, gets rid of its identity and we get silent. And the second path
Çeşitliliğin sağladığı zenginliği
is as follows.
kaybetme tehlikesi
There is
ve
this
korkusu
danger
var.
of losing the cultural richness, and we might not speak out,
Konuya korumaya dönük bir yola girmektir ve
and we might
yereli
strive to preserve the past. And in this understanding, the local is kept within the history. And the third path, which I would like to follow and which I prefer personally speaking, is about being connected to the rest of the world and becoming a part of the transformational journey of the world and revealing the
yeniden
identity of the local and reconstructing the identity of the local in a seamless manner.
dünyanın
Each and every locality in this understanding
geliştirebilmelidir.
should further improve its identity by being connected with the global. If you believe the third path is the right path to follow, then
Değişmektedir.
the information to understand the local is also
Nesneleriyle,
transformed.
insanlarıyla biliriz ama yetmez.
Well, having some information around the local with its people, with its materials is not enough. You should have more information about where it stands in the world
Gerekir.
and have a more global perspective.
Aslında yerele böyle bir şey yüklediğimizde şöyle bir şey
When we
ortaya
consider local from this perspective, what comes out
yanıltabilen bir noktaya gelmiş olabiliriz. Yereli bir
is
özne
that we
olarak
might
görmeye başlarız.
make a mistake because the local itself turns into a subject. However, the local itself is not a subject.
Yerel nedir?
What is local?
Yerel,
Local
içinde yaşayan bireylerin
is where
ve öznelerin eylemleri sonucu olarak dünyaya
the individuals
uyum yapmaya
live,
çalışan
and the
ve
local
sürekli olarak evrilen bir
is
şey.
constantly evolved in an attempt to follow up the global and to be in line with the global. So the behaviors of the
Ve onun
individuals
dönüşüm öyküsü.
cannot be boiled down to one single element. However, all the individuals will contribute to the evolution and transformation of the
Belediye
local.
başkanı nerede duruyor?
So where does the mayor stand in this locality?
Onun bireylerinden biri. Ama yol gösterici
Well, the
bir
mayor himself is one of the individuals within the society, but he is a guiding figure, so to speak.
tür belediye başkanından.
So there are two types
Eğer
of
demokrasi açığı yaratmaya
mayors, as I told you.
istemeyen
If
bir belediye başkanıysa
there is one mayor who does not want to follow up the path of democracy,
insanlarla birlikte dönüşülen ve onlara
Then
birlikte bu dönüşüm
transformation, the journey of
birlikte
transformation
gelişmesini sağlayan kişidir.
will not be possible.
Bu süreç içinde
Only if the mayor is willing to follow up the third path, then a transformation will be materialized.
Yerel öyle bir öykü ki
Local has a certain story.
yabancılaşılamayan
You cannot get away from it. You
yabancılaşılamayan
cannot become
bu öykünün
foreign to this
kavranması
story. Grasping
ve bunun
this
demokrasi
story
açığı olmadan kavranması
and grasping this story
yerel demokrasi
without
için
any issues around democracy
soyut
will be
üstünden
materialized within
merkezden bu demokrasi
democracy.
kurulamaz.
And we cannot have a central understanding.
Merkezi demokrasiler inşa edilebilir.
The central democracies might be built through the local democracies. Therefore, we should ask ourselves what the function of local government will be, and
Ele alalım.
we should address how its relationship with the central government will be addressed. Well, I'm about to conclude my speech, excuse me.
Şimdi merkezi yönetim dediğimizde
What we mean by central government
iş bölümünde
brings up a certain cooperation. What will the central government do in terms of cooperation? We have the local government.
ayrı bir toprağı var mı?
Does the central government have a different territory? No.
Topraklarının toplamı
So it is the sum of the territories of the local governments, right?
burada
From this perspective,
kararlar vermek, kurallar koymak,
making
uygulamalar
decisions,
yapmak
setting up
yetkisine
rules
sahiptir. Ama
is
bunun için
something perpetuated by the central government.
yönetimin
However,
mantığı ne olabilir?
we should ask ourselves what the rationality behind central government is. The first function of central government is to keep the local governments together and to set up a new social
Gerekli
atmosphere.
işlevleri yüklenecektir.
So it has some certain
Dış ilişkilerin
roles to play.
düzenlenmesi,
For instance, regulating the foreign relations, defending the country, setting up the infrastructure of the entire
yerindenlik ilkesine uygun olan
state, and
ölçekteki işleri yapmak.
making use of the subsidiarity principle are the functions of the central government.
Herkesin elinde olması gereken normal işlevler.
Well, these are the
Ama bunların
normal
ötesine geçtiği zaman
roles
aşırı bir merkezileşme oluşuyor.
of the central government. However, if there is this over centralization, then it is clear that there is an issue around democracy. And in an attempt to eliminate and tackle this issue, local should assume more responsibility.
Konuşmamın sonuna geldim.
Well, I'm about to conclude my speech, and I would like to wrap it up.
Eğer bir ülkede
If in one single country the quality of the democracy is to be improved, then
yerel demokrasinin kalitesinin
it is clear that we should invest in improving the quality of local democracy.
yerel
If
demokrasiyi doğru dürüst kurabilirsek,
we can set up the local democracy
demokrasi açığı yaratmıyorsak,
in the most appropriate manner,
merkezi hükümetin
if there are no
işlevinin
democracy
ne olacağı,
issues,
bu yerel
then the
kurulduktan
function
sonra
of the central democracy will be set up once this local
tepeden aşağı.
understanding is established. We cannot set up democracy from a top-down approach. If you set up a democracy through a top-down
Siz bir yerel
approach, then you're going to have more and more issues.
bir demokrasi kurmak istiyorsanız,
If you would like to
cümle söyleyip bitireceğim. Ne yapmanız gerekiyor?
set up a local democracy, what
Bir
should you do? There are two
parçalanmamış
issues
bir
that you have to
komünite
take into
oluşturmak
consideration. First and foremost, you should have a non-polarized community in place.
temel
In Turkey,
problemlerden biri
one of the main issues
komüniteyi mahalle düzeyinde düşünmek.
is to think of the community
Düzeyinde
on a scale of neighborhoods.
kent düzeyinde ve daha üst düzeylerde komüniteler söz konusudur.
We have some urban level communities instead, and
Kent düzeyinde bir komüniteyi kurmak için de
in an attempt to set up an urban level
stratejisi
community, you should have a public space strategy. And this public space strategy
yalnız bir mekansal düzenleme stratejisi değil.
is not only about the space
Kamusal
merely,
alanda yer alacak faaliyetleri
it regulates the activities taking place in the public space as well, and how we can become innovative within the public space. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Tekeli. It was so enlightening. As Professor Tekeli stated, a democracy that gives the right to live with dignity begins with local governance. That's why I want to ask honorable mayors if they want to contribute to Mr. Tekeli's speech. And I'd like to give the floor first of all to Mr. Mayor İmamoğlu, because some of the notes that Professor Tekeli stated are actually your own experiences. As a journalist, I witnessed that about central government and local governments. Do you want to share your ideas and thoughts about it?
Siz neler düşünüyorsunuz efendim bu konuyla ilgili fikirlerinizi paylaşmak ister misiniz?
Teşekkürler.
Thank you very much.
Ben tabii hocamı dinleyince
Well,
sadece beni mi konuşuyor
when
diye
I listened to
düşünmeden
Mr.
evvel,
Tekeli, of course, my experiences came to my mind. I felt like he was talking about me only. It was like he communicated the issues that we have experienced so far. Well, democracy is a very much valuable concept,
en önemli
and it is
kavramı ama
the most
doğru
important concept of the 21st century, but we should have the right definition in place, and we should have the right practice.
hocamızın konuşmasında ben
Therefore, as I listened to Mr. Tekeli's speech, I wrote down a couple of important elements. I would like to underscore them. For instance, the problems around democracy.
değerli bir kavram.
This is an important topic. So what kind of a democratic issue are we experiencing in this current system?
Bazı uygulamaları yapabilmek.
We should ponder on this issue and we should act upon it.
Kanunlar ya da metinler
The written documents or regulations might not help us,
biz kendi
and
kabiliyetlerimizle
we should make use of our own capabilities
çözebiliriz diye
and
düşünüyorum.
get rid of
Tabii
the
yerinde
issues around democracy. Subsidiarity is another term that Mr. Tekeli dwelt on, and the democracy should begin with the local governments. This is something we have to underscore. It is clear that democracy cannot be established through central government.
İstanbul'la ilgili
With regard to Istanbul,
uygulamalardaki antidemokratik bir
Antidemocratic
takım kavramlara karşı verdiğimiz mücadeledeki
issues are surrounding us, and the fight that we are having against anti-democratic
yani
approaches
kısım
is highly important for us, and transparency is the best weapon of us in Istanbul. Transparency, the principle of transparency helps us a lot. We share what we are doing with the citizens. We are very much open to sharing our ideas with the public opinion. And I think transparency is a weapon that is paramount for us. We definitely talk to the citizens and we share our complaints with the citizens. If there is a certain understanding of democracy in the society, then the citizens can easily understand you. I believe that I am very lucky in this sense, since I'm a mayor of Istanbul, and I can easily tell you that the public opinion is supporting us. Another example to transparency is as follows. When I came to the power, I had a principle of screening the council, and we had live events. It was a great experience to see many people watching our council. And I believe this issue is still very much on the agenda. For instance, the Budget Council 1 week ago was very much active, and around 15 million people watched us live. So I believe transparency is a tool that strengthens the local actors. We have to display anything and everything to our citizens. We have to share what is happening with them. When people ask me how I would like to be remembered and what kind of a mayor I would like to become for my city, what I have always told you is as follows. I would like to be remembered as the most democratic mayor of Istanbul, because it would definitely make me happy, and I believe a democratic stance will have repercussions on anyone, and each and every person should be deemed as a citizen, be them young or old. I feel it is the source of creating a happy society. Well, we have had a couple of practices. For instance, we designed public spaces, we had some projects, and we were not satisfied with it. We had competitions, and the citizens themselves voted in these competitions. For instance, more than 400,000 people voted for the design of the public spaces. I believe this is a very high figure. Moreover, for the very first time, in a city of 20 million people, we had participatory budgets in place. And in doing so, we received hundreds of offers, and following the analysis of the experts, we voted for these projects, and 150,000 people voted for this project. Each and every democratic step is owned by our people. It's not only in Istanbul, it's not something peculiar to Istanbul. I think it is the same case all around the world, because the world itself is not as big as we thought it was previously. World is small. It's in our mobile phones, so to speak, and we might reach information anywhere and everywhere. From this understanding, the issues around democracy might be tackled through more participatory decision-making mechanisms.
yine bir 10 gün önce
It
devreye
was 10 days ago
İstanbul
that we
Senin
initiated a project
uygulamasıyla
entitled
anında
Istanbul is
vatandaşlar
yours.
hem
Through this
İstanbul'la
application,
ilgili bütün
the
işlemlerini,
citizens
fatura ödeme,
can do
abone olma,
anything.
takip etme gibi bütün işlemleri
They might
yapabileceği
even
gibi bazen bir sokak için ya da bir mahalle için
exercise
ya da bir
the
bölge için
subscription
soru sorup
practices over there. They might ask questions over this application and do anything and everything around Istanbul. So it's digital democracy that we are applying. This understanding of digital democracy, I believe, is what we need in the 21st century. It's a highly important tool in the century, and this tool will enable us to scatter democracy to a large mass. As a conclusion, I would like to conclude with a couple of sentences. So, I believe Mr. Tekeli already communicated what we are experiencing. So the tension between the central government and the local government is something that we are experiencing, and I have attempted to define what we have experienced so far. I would like to wrap it up, and I would like to state that we need maximum participation in the 21st century. I believe anti-democratic practices will end through maximum participation. Maximum participation will definitely enlighten our road. Once we have common understanding in place, once we have common sense in place, we will become more successful. So we definitely need the sense, the understanding, and the mind of the people for whom we are serving. Another issue is as follows: the new generation democracy. And new generation democracy covers all the points that I have discussed so far.
And maybe this is something that we need to strengthen the innovative part and involving all the new practices. A next-gen democracy and building it is something that we need to do, perhaps, because next-gen democracy, new generation of this democracy, will be important for Generation Y and Generation Z, because this is going to be something that analyzes their own expectations, and maybe this is going to be something that will address the expectations of these generations. This will also be, this would also include the methods that enable the tools to address their expectations. This is what I think. Last but not least, I believe that all mayors are brave Democrats, especially the mayors on this table should be brave, courageous Democrats. This is what I believe. And this will bring about a brave democracy as well. Courage and supporting participation and inclusion will help us build happier societies and more sensitive societies all around the globe. And a democracy-based speech was delivered by Professor İlhan here, and he also shook us up a little bit with some of the warnings. And I will also have I just wanted to share some of the practices out on the site in relation to his remarks. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So much to Mayor İmamoğlu. It was such a fruitful discussion. That's why I want to ask honorable mayors if they want to contribute to this discussion or if they want to share any ideas.
Siz söz almak istiyor musunuz? Fikirleriniz var mı?
Would you mind pressing the...
Buyurun efendim.
I would like to add a few words to this discussion.
Ben de bu
Is it
tartışmaya
possible in
birkaç
Albanian?
kelam etmek istiyorum.
Do we have
Arnavutluk
translation?
Arnavutluk
Okay.
dilinde yapacağım bunu.
I nderuar kryetar Imamullo, të gjithë të nderuar kryetar, po më jam I nderuar profesor, po më vjen mirë që keni hap një diskutim në lidhje me demokracinë në qeverisje. Unë vi prej Kosovës.
Ben Kosova'dan geliyorum.
I'm coming from
Yeni
Kosovo.
bir ülke ve
It's a new country.
multietnik
And
multikültürel bir
It's
bir
a
yapı.
multicultural structure
bir toplum
with
olarak,
many ethnicities.
Savaştan sonra
society,
gelen bir toplum.
We've
bi-
built
bir-
the
çok zor bir
society
geçiş,
actually after the war,
yaşıyoruz.
and this has been a rather
de,
challenging transition period for us.
Biz de iktidar olarak hangi sistem kullanıyor
So
iktidarda?
what kind of a ruling system
Bize,
is being used here?
en kullanılan sistem Lipart'ın o sistem
Well,
yani merkezi bir
the
sistemdir.
system
ve
is
o
a central system
kullandığı-
that we're utilizing.
bize yerel iktidarda merkezi bir sistemi kullanmaya
Using,
çalışıyoruz.
we're trying to use a central system in a
çok
local
insan var
environment.
ve
There are
herkes
many
bu
people
merkez
here,
sistemine merkez iktidara katılabilir. Bu sistem bize
All of the
bizim için,
people can take part in this
ne,
central system.
hangi konuda yararlıydı?
It
Çünkü
was beneficial for us
sisteme
because
göre, bu
according to the
sistemden
system,
çıkan yararlar, yani bütün
there were certain
insanlardan
benefits.
aldığımız fikirler, bütün
We also
insanlardan
had the chance to
aldığımız
hear the opinion of people.
fikirler ve bir şans bizim için şans idi ve
was
ona
a
göre
chance
biz
for us,
iktidarımızı
And this also helped
tasarladık
us
ve böylece
design
devam ediyoruz.
our position, and this is how we proceed.
Shumë shpesh janë ndru qeverit dhe
Bizde
nuk ka
çok
pasur
hızlı iktidarlar değişti
Well,
ve sabit bir
ruling
iktidar
parties have changed quite
bazen
quickly,
mümkün olmuyordu.
and it wasn't really possible for us to
yerel
hold on to a
konusunda,
certain
her zaman
ruling
4 yıl yani
party.
devamlı olarak
But for the past 4
bir
years,
iktidar vardı.
there has been
Ve
a
her
ruling
zaman
party.
yani yerel konusunda, yerel iktidar
And as
konusunda
for
biz
local
her zaman
administrations and local
yani
ruling
en
powers,
iyisi yapmaya çalıştık.
we always tried our best to
bir unsur daha
deliver
unsur
the
daha
best
var.
outcomes and results. And there is one other thing that I'd like to share.
Merkezi ve yerel arasında
Central
ilişki,
and local and the relationship between them.
eğer merkezi iktidarda bir parti varsa fakat
If there is a
yerel
party in the
iktidarda başka bir
central
parti
administration
varsa,
with
her
the
zaman
local
arasında,
administrations belonging to
her
the
zaman
opposition
çalışma.
party,
Ama
there's
tersi
always a
var
conflict
ise,
between them.
yani
But
aynı parti
if the
ise,
contrary
o zaman
is
her
true,
zaman
so
bir
I mean,
destek var.
there are these positions are
Projeler her
held
zaman
by the same
destekleniyor
parties.
merkezden
In this
ve
case,
bu-
projects are
bu
always
sistem bize
supported
hala devam
at
ediyor.
a central
Yani
level, and this is
değiştirmek
what we
için zor
have.
oluyor.
It's difficult
Ama
to change it,
değiştirmeye çalışmaya,
and at least
ümit
trying
ediyoruz.
to
Çünkü
change it is
bu
something
doğru
that we
değil.
hope
Yani
for. Well, because it's not really right.
Çünkü biz yani bu yüzyılda her alanda yani
In this century,
değiştirmemiz lazım.
we need to change this.
Daha yüksek hedeflere ulaşmamız
We
lazım.
need to pursue
Ve
higher
insanların ihtiyaçlarını
And the needs of people,
karşılamak için
for
her
us to
zaman
address that,
onların yanında
we always
bulunmamız
need to
lazım.
stand by them,
Çünkü
because
bazı insanların ihtiyaçları o kadar uzun süre
People's
o kadar böyle
needs
bekletiliyor çünkü
remain
ondan sonra parti bile değişiyor,
untouched,
hükümet değişiyor ve
untackled.
orada
Sometimes
kalıyor. O
ruling
yüzden
parties
bu
change and opposition change, but their
merkezi ve yerel
changes and
sistem,
their needs remain there,
iktidarda
untouched. So
bu çatışma giderilirse çok
if we
iyi
can
olur.
address this conflict between the
Çünkü
local and the central powers, it would be great.
Merkezi arasında bir çatışma
Because
olmaması lazım, bir işbirliği
We shouldn't really
olması
have this
lazım
conflict.
aslında.
We should have this
Ve
accord. We
insanlar da
need
bu
to have
sistemin
this
içinde olması lazım.
agreement, and people should be involved in this system.
Marita Maliki.
Çok teşekkürler.
Anyone would like to
Sayın
contribute?
Maliki.
Ah.
Katkıda bulunmak isteyen
Now we
var
will
mı?
listen to the contribution of Kostas Peleditis.
Kostas Bey'in.
Είναι ενδιαφέρουσα η συζήτηση που ανοίγουμε. Από την Πάτρα μιλώ, από την Ελλάδα. Patras'tan geliyorum, Yunanistan'dan. Çok
I'm coming
ilginç
from
bir
Patras, Greece.
konuşmaydı.
This has been a
Demokrasi
rather
çok
interesting
büyük bir
speech
söz,
because democracy
yerel
is
merkezle ilişki
a
içindedir.
word
Biz
that
yerelde,
carries a particular weight, and it is in
merkezi,
relation with
hükümetin
the
koyduğu
local
kurallara uymayan herhangi bir
administrations.
şey,
Well,
hiçbir
something
şey
that doesn't
yapamayız. Bu
really
her
follow
yerde,
the
her
rules
ülkede
of the
geçerlidir.
ruling parties. We can't really do
Demokrasi
anything
kelimesi çok güzel bir şey.
without following
Herkesin
it, and
arzu
this
ettiği
is
bir
a
şeyler.
fact in
Ancak,
all parts of the world. Democracy, yes, this is something that we
arkasında
all
güç de
would like to
gizlidir.
have, but behind democracy lies
Bizim
power,
toplumlarımız,
strength, and our societies, our communities.
Bazen elinde ekonomik güç vardır.
Sometimes they have economic power in their hand,
ekonomik güç için
and this
çalışanlar var. Yani
economic power,
sınıfsal
there are
toplumlardan
people who
oluşuyoruz.
are working for this economic power
gerçek
because
güç
our
ekonomik
societies are
güçtür.
based on classes. So democracy
yapılan
is
kanunlar da
somehow
bu
related with
gücün,
power, and the laws that are passed
istediklerini yerine getirmek için yapılıyor. Yani
are
bu
only
teoride olan bir
passed
şey değil.
to
Yani
help
sonuç olarak
them achieve what they want.
her ne kadar
So as a result,
ekonomik güç olduğu sürece demokrasi de buna aynı
as
yoldan
long
yürümek
as economic
zorundadır.
power
O yüzden
exists,
de bu
democracy
sonuçlar var.
needs to
Tarihsel
follow its
olarak
pathway. So this is what we've had throughout history.
ekonomik güç ne zaman
So
tehdit
economic power,
edildiyse
whenever it was threatened,
her zaman meclis demokrasisinin sonu gelmiştir. Çünkü
it
bu
meant
ekonomik gücün
that
devamı
it
için
was the
gerekli bir
end
şeydi.
of parliamentary
Yani bunu
democracy.
çok
This was
yıllar
something that
içerisinde
was
çok yaşadık.
necessary for the
Yani şunları
continuity and
söylememiz
continuation of
lazım.
economy. So this is what
Tamamen,
we've witnessed throughout
full bir
history, and
demokrasi
there is
için
something that we
konuşmamız
need
için,
to take into account. And for us to talk about a full
ekonomik güç çoğun
democracy,
elinde olması
economic
gerekiyor.
power
Çok
should
olan
be
insanlar da
held by the
kuralları
majority of
seçmek
people,
zorunda
and
ki bu
this
kurallar da
majority of people
çoğunluğun,
should elect, and
haklarını
these rules
koruyacaktır.
should
Ve
be
bundan
passed in a
sonraki
manner to
aşamada,
defend the rights of the
o
majority.
kurallar hakkında
So
konuşabileceğiz. Ben de
this is
sadece
when we
bizim,
can talk about the rules.
belediyemizle ilgili
And as for
bir şey
our
söylemek
own
istiyorum.
municipality, I'd like to add one thing.
İstanbul Belediye Başkanı'nın da söylediklerine benzer bir şey
So
söyleyecek.
Mayor of Istanbul, I
Dedi
would
ki,
like to add on to what you said.
demokrasimiz var diyor
Yes, we
belediyemizde.
have a democracy.
Bizde de öyle. Biz de
Yes,
demokratik
we have
yollarla
democracy as
seçildik.
well. We were
Meclis,
elected through
belediye.
democratic
Ama
ways.
içerik olarak
But
demokratik
looking at the
davranmanız,
content of it, acting
gerekiyorsa
in a
bu neye
democratic
bağlı?
manner,
Sorunları
fashion.
çözebilmek.
So for us,
Bunu ama
we need
yapabilecek,
to
gücün
solve
olması
the
gerekiyor.
problems, and for this we
Diğer,
need to have the power
belediyelerde
and strength
böyle
to
elinde,
do so.
araçlar var mı? Merkezi
Are there any tools,
hükümet
for
karar
example,
vermiyor mu?
that you have?
Neler
Central
yapabileceğimize,
governments,
ne
don't
kadar
they
paramız
really
olacağına, ne kadar
decide
bütçemiz
how
olacağına,
much money we
nasıl
will have,
hareket
what kind of a
edeceğimize?
budget we will
Yani,
have, how we will
demokrasimiz,
behave?
bizim
So
demokrasimiz,
democracy is, this is the democracy that we have.
merkezi demokrasiye
So the
bağlı. Yani
democracies
bize
that
ne
we
diyorlar? İşte
pursue
sizin
are
elinizdeki
dependent
demokrasi bu
on the
kadar.
democracy
Yani
that
bu
the
konu çok,
central
geniş bir
powers
konu,
have.
çok
So this is
zaman
the amount
lazım
of
bunu
democracy that you need to
konuşmamız
have.
lazım
So
ama ilginç olan
actually
şey
words aren't
demokrasi
enough. We
hakkında
need to
tartışıyor
more time
olmamız.
for it, but it's great
so
that we're
much for
discussing
your
democracy at the moment.
Mayor Paladitis. Now we will
Katkılarınız
continue
için
with Filip
Sayın
Zorzic.
Başkan, şimdi Filip Bey'le devam ediyoruz.
Thank you very much. I'll speak in Croatian, please.
Ben
Poštovani
Hrvatça
profesore,
konuşacağım.
dakle, rekli ste da se iza zatvorenih vrata krije loša demokracija. Reprezentativna demokracija se može koristiti u loše svrhe, ali rekli ste može se koristiti na manje loš način. To je, čini mi se, dobra sekcija demokracije. Dopustite mi 4 važne točke. Prva tema je transparentnost. Transparentnost u procesu donošenja odluka. Je li to dijeljenje politike s narodom? You have translate, yes? No?
Yeah,
Okay,
it
I
started.
see.
Just let's be sure that we understand you clearly.
Sizi net anladığımızdan emin olalım lütfen.
Can we hear the simultaneous interpretation right now of Mr.
Tercümeyi duyabiliyor muyuz şu anda?
Zorzic?
Okay.
I think you might continue. Thank you.
Hvala. Dakle, za profesora komentirao sam reprezentativnu demokraciju, ali me zanima je li transparentnost u procesu donošenja odluka dijeljenje politike s narodom. Zašto jedan političar postaje političar? Je li to zbog toga da bi društvo učinili boljim? I još važnije, je li demokracija danas i loše korištenje prava. Je li to to? Je li to zatvorena i otvorena politika? Je li danas uopće upitan opstanak demokracije? To je ključno pitanje, ali nema prijevoda.
Mr.
There
Zorzic,
is no
so sorry
translate.
for interrupting once again, but I think that no one can quite hear the translation.
Okay.
Şimdi tercümeyi kimse tam duyamıyor.
So I will ask the control room and simultaneous interpretations if they can let me know that
Tercümenin
we are ready to hear Mayor Filip Zorzic, then he might continue.
Şimdi geliyor mu ses?
Now we can,
Sıkıntı vardı çünkü.
okay, I think now we can hear
Şu
you.
an
Let's try one more time.
Možemo pokušati, u redu?
Yeah.
Try.
I
Teknik
think.
sıkıntıydı.
It was a technical
it
problem.
okay for
They're
professor?
informing me right now, so I think it's gonna be all
Mogu
right.
ispočetka?
Thank you.
Može?
Thank you so
Hvala.
much.
Dobro, neću dugo, dakle pričao sam o reprezentativnosti.
Dolayı ben
I'm
çoğulcu
going to
demokrasi
repeat
hakkında
for
yorum
technical
yaptım.
reasons. I
Hocanın
made
yani
comments
demokrasi
about
kötü niyetle kullanılabilir
democracy.
ve çok daha
Democracy may
şekilde onu
be
kullanabiliriz.
used for
Burada
malicious
anahtar kelime
motivations.
şeffaflıktır.
And the key
Karar verme
word here is
mekanizmadan şeffaflık
transparency.
çok önemlidir.
So
Acaba
transparency is
halkla
quite
paylaşılıyor
important
mu bu
in decision
kararlar?
making
Neden bir
mechanisms.
siyasi adam siyasetçi oluyor? Acaba
A politician
toplumu daha iyi bir
being
hale
a
getirmek
politician,
mi için?
do they
Ve burada
become a
demokrasi
politician to
sorunu
make
ortaya
society a better
çıkarıyoruz.
place?
Açık
And this is
siyaset
where
nedir ya
the
da kapalı
question
siyaset
of
nedir?
democracy comes
Acaba
up. What is
demokrasi,
open politics and what is
kanunu,
closed politics?
kötü anlamda mı
So
kullanıyor?
does this really to do
Çoğulcu
with
demokrasi
using
soru
democracy
işareti mi
for
geliyor? Acaba
malicious
bunlar,
reasons?
iki tane
So
hakikat mı? Hocanın
participatory
çünkü,
democracy,
hoca
we're
iki
talking
tane
about it
siyaset adamı,
because
bireysel
the
siyasetçilikten
professor
bahsetti
cited two
ve
types of
bu
politicians
ikisi de
here. So
birinden bağımsız olabilir mi?
and
Çok
can
ilginç
they
olan
be really
insanlar
independent
onları
from one
yönetilmeyi
another?
sevmiyor diyor.
Well,
Bence bu
people do
biraz
not really like being
bireysel,
ruled,
Balkan'ın bir
he
sıkıntısıdır.
says.
Çünkü
But
aslında
this is not
Balkan'daki insan
really
yönetilmeyi
related with the entire
seviyor.
world.
Çünkü
This
onlara göre
is
bir
about the
demokrasi
Balkan
var acaba.
region. But
Ve
is this really a
neden burada,
democracy? And why are we
iktidar kullanıyoruz? Acaba 21.
using the
yüzyılın,
ruling powers here at the moment?
geleceği
And
mi?
20th century, is this the
Yönetmek,
future of the
demokrasi mi?
20th century? Or should we really
Sanırım
focus
bunlar,
on the future
bunlarla
democracy?
ilgili bayağı kafa
So
yormamız
we
gerekiyor
need to
diye
think
düşünüyorum.
about that, I believe.
Contribute? Would you mind pressing the button? Thank you.
Is this okay? Because I'm going to speak on Serbian.
Ben Sırpça
Now
konuşacağım
we can hear you
şimdi.
properly. Thank you so much,
Tamam,
Mr.
ses
Mayor.
geliyor.
Ja želim samo kratko,
Ben çok
pre svega da se
kısa değineceğim. Hocaya teşekkür etmek istiyorum
I'll be
İlhan Tekeli Hoca'ya. Çünkü
quite
gerçekten çok
brief
iyi
here.
bir dersti.
Thank you
Çünkü sunumu
very much,
müthişti.
İlhan Tekeli.
Çünkü
Your presentation
sunumda,
was great
iyi bir soru sormak
because a
ve
great
iyi,
question was posed.
iyi bir şeydir ve sanırım
And it
ki
was
biz
good.
bugün çok soru sorduk
And
ve
many
büyük
questions
cevaplar
were asked,
gerektirir bu.
and
Ben
this
bu teorik
would
açıdan,
require
çok yakınım
huge
bu,
answers too.
insancı
Well,
demokrasiye.
actually, I
Çünkü
am quite
bunlar
close
temel
to
prensiplerdir.
humane
Mesela
democracy or
Fromm ya da
human-oriented
başka
democracy.
bir grup insanların
Certain
sordukları
circles
soruları,
of people
insanların
have these questions,
bilincinden
like Eric Fromm
ancak bu
asked this,
seviyede
and
demokrasiye
such a
etki edebiliriz
level
diye düşünüyorum. Onun
is
için
the level
sadece
that we can
kısaca buna
attain when it
değinmek
comes to
istedim ve
having an
teşekkür
impact
etmek
on
istedim
democracy.
hocaya.
Thank you very
Çünkü
much. I wanted
bu
to touch upon
yaklaşım,
this, and we wanted
insancıl
to thank you
demokrasinin
because the human-oriented
yaklaşımı
democracy
ve tabii ki burada
and
çok
the
soru var
approach,
ve çok
such an
cevap
approach, like
vermemiz
many questions are there
gerekiyor.
to be dealt with and many answers to provide.
If there's any mayor who likes to contribute,
Başka belediye başkanı varsa söz almak
okay,
isteyen.
to Mr. Hasan Aziz, could you please
Hasan
press the
Aziz,
button?
buyurun efendim, düğmeye basarsanız.
Благодаря много.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Toplan
Thank you very much.
Първо бих искал да благодаря за
Her şeyden önce teşekkür etmek istiyorum.
Well, thank you very much,
Profesör İlhan
first and
Tekeli'ye
foremost,
güzel,
to
konuşması
Professor
için
İlhan
ve,
Tekeli for his great
senin
speech
Başkan İmamoğlu da
And
gibi ben de kendimi üniversite öğrencisi gibi
as
hissettim bir
Imamoglu,
anda ve
I felt
büyük bir
like a
keyifle
student at university,
dinledim.
and
Çünkü
it was a
gerçekten bu
great
bir
pleasure to hear from
demokrasi
him, hear from
dersiydi.
the professor, because it was a lecture on democracy.
Demişken
As we talk
birkaç
about
tane
democracy,
birkaç bir şey söylemek
I'd like
istiyorum.
to utter a few words.
Tercümanlara teşekkür etmek
First of
istiyorum.
all, I'd
Özellikle
like to thank
Bulgarcadan
the
çeviri yapan
interpreters, especially
arkadaşlarıma.
the colleagues who are
Şimdi
interpreting from Bulgarian.
katılımcı demokrasiden
So participatory
bahsetmişti
democracy
hocamız.
is one thing that the professor cited, and there is a principle.
Temsilci demokrasisinde
In representative
ben
democracy,
şöyle anlıyorum.
there is one thing that I
Türkçemde de hep
understand
bunu
here,
söylüyorum,
and this is one thing that I'd
vatandaşlarımıza da bunu
say. In
söylüyorum.
Kartsali, I
Belediye
share it with the
aslında bir
dwellers, with
nevi,
the citizens there.
aynadır sizin için.
And
Yani
citizens
siz bu
are
aynada
actually a mirror
kendinizi
for you,
görüyor
and you
olmanız gerekiyor.
need to see yourself in this mirror.
Herkes bir söz sahibi olabilmelidir.
So everybody should have a say
Bu belediyede
in
Sayın
the municipality.
Kerimoğlu Kırklareli'nden
And Mr. Kerimoğlu
temsilci
from
demokrasisinden bir örnek
Kerimoğlu,
vermişti dün.
he shared an
Çok güzel
example
bir şarkı dinletti
from
bize ve
representative
herkes,
democracy.
bu şarkıda
A
aslında
great
kendi
song
sesini duymuş oldu.
was delivered, conveyed, and
Ve
everybody had the chance to hear their own
kendinden
voice
bir şey
in that
buldu
song, and everybody had
orada.
the chance to find something relating to them.
İkincisini de söylemek istediğim,
And the second point is,
herkes belediyede kendi yerini bulmalı ve sesi olmalı
everybody should
orada.
hear their own voice in that song.
Ben de 2 üniversitede ders veriyorum. Yerel yönetimlerle ilgili
I
ve birkaç
lecture
tane tezim
at two
var bununla
universities
ilgili.
about local administrations.
Tezlerimden bir tanesi
And
yerel
one
demokrasinin aslında demokrasinin
thesis that I have is
oluşturduğunu söylüyorum ben.
that representative democracy constitutes the basis of democracy.
Demokrasinin yansıması ise
And the reflection
Sayın
of democracy, as Mr. Tekeli cited,
subsidiarity'dir.
is actually subsidiarity.
Yani merkez eğer sorumluluk paylaşımı olmazsa,
Without the delegation of
hocamın da
powers or
söylediği gibi,
responsibilities, as the
subsidiarity'den,
professor said,
bahsedemeyiz.
we can't really talk about subsidiarity.
Son yıllarda bizim
In the
demokrasimizde
recent
de böyle
years,
bir gelişme
this
söz konusu.
has been
Bir
something
şey daha ilave
in our
etmek
own democracy,
istiyorum.
but
Eğer,
there's one thing I'd
belediye,
also like to add.
Toplumun aynası olamazsa
If
demokrasi de
a municipality
gelişemez.
cannot act like a mirror of society, in this case, this society cannot develop, cannot
ve
make
aynı
progress.
zamanda belediye
I've been in the opposition party for around a decade, and my party is an opposition party, but still we've actually gained the trust and confidence of people, and for the past 12 years I've been in this position.
Contribution that our honorable mayors will tell us, but I have to remind that I don't want to postpone your bilateral meetings, so I will kindly ask the mayors to limit their speech for maximum 2 minutes. Mr. Kesimoğlu, the floor is yours.
Rica edeceğim. Kesimoğlu, buyurun efendim, söz sizde.
Teşekkür ediyorum.
Thank you very much. This is the second day of the Balkan Cities Network Summit, and I'd like to greet you all cordially. As we all know, local administrations are the first step of democracies, and local administrations, central administrations have always been a stage for conflicts of interests. But as the people heading local administrations, we need to understand the supervision of this tutelage in our decisions. We wanted to have autonomy as much as possible, but to attain the holistic structure, they basically exert power on us. As other colleagues, I've had the chance to to be an MP for 8 years, and for the past 8 years I've been a mayor. I had state positions, I also had NGO positions, so I had the chance to interact with many stakeholders, and I've seen the advantages of being on the both sides. And the problems that we've faced are definitely different out on the site, and these problems are really difficult to overcome, difficult to tackle, because countries are actually a country of rules, and there are exceptions and there are rules. These general rules are always implemented to those who people would like to otherize. So all the exceptions are somehow confined to them. They're implemented specific to them, who people want to otherize. But we always need to focus on the validity of fairness and justice. And for justice to be strong, those who hold the power should also be fair and they should be just. And although it may be perceived in the same manner, there is a huge difference between politics and policy making. So politicians or making politics, although they are perceived in the same manner, they are different concepts, because politicians think about the upcoming round of elections. However, policy makers think about the next generations, and each and every stakeholder that we have here are basically people who are involved in politics, making policies, and they are considering the future generations and the circumstances under which they will live. I believe that we should all take a stance from today onwards to think about these issues, and I believe that this is possible. So democracy isn't really about us having influence on the minorities. It is about us defending the rights of minorities or groups who basically constitute minorities. And I believe that this approach will also help us address all the existing solutions. Thank you very much, and greetings to you all again.
Now we will continue with the Mayor of Mytilene, Mayor Stratis Kitelis.
Αγαπητοί αξιότιμοι συνάδελφοι, εγώ θέλω να επενέσω τον καθηγητή, τόσο τον καθηγητή.
Hocama takdir etmem gerekiyor.
I would like to send my greetings to the
Ve
professor.
İmamoğlu'nu da takdir etmek istiyorum. Demokrasi Yunanistan'da doğdu bildiğiniz gibi.
Democracy was born in Greece, as you know,
bütün dünyaya yayıldı
and it
ve
spread
genişledi.
the world from Greece.
Ve şu anda konuştuğumuz konu da bu.
And this is what we're talking about.
Halkın da bununla ilgili bir tecrübesi vardır. Bizim de
And
görevimiz
all
demokrasiyi
societies have an
korumaktır
experience in
ve bunu
democracy.
bütün dünyaya bilgisini vermek,
And
iletişimini
we need to
yapmaktır,
inform
demokrasiyle
people about
iletişim
that.
yapmaktır.
Making the communication of democracy.
Ama bu nesneyi yerelde de elde edebilmemiz
And
için
for us to
bazı
attain it at a
yerlerde,
local
mesela
level,
ekonomik seviyede olduğu gibi
well, this should be, it can be, for example, on the economic level.
Vatandaşlarımızın haklarını edebilmesi ve
we need to defend the rights of certain groups, and
bizi bu yere, bu göreve getiren vatandaşlarımızın da haklarına saygı göstermemiz lazım.
And we also need to respect the rights of people who voted for us, who made us stand where we are today. And in the coming discussions, I believe that this is going to be the level on which we speak and discuss, and this is also going to help us reach an accord between us. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Share their ideas.
Çok teşekkürler. Fikir paylaşmak isteyen başkanlar var mı?
Mayor Polyak.
Yes, dear colleagues. Well, it's not, well, it is connected to the topics, but it's not about democracy. It's about why we are here. Not only today, why Homo sapiens are here. And I wanted to share something that I read 2 days ago in New Scientist, which is connected with the general idea of the cooperation and the collaboration. So the title of the article is Why Homo sapiens Outlived Other Humans. And they say, we once shared the planet with at least 7 other types of human. And ironically, our success may have been due to our deepest vulnerability, being dependent on others. And let me just share a few sentences. Humans today are uniquely alone. For the majority of the existence of Homo sapiens, we share the planet with many other types of human. At the time when our lineage first evolved in Africa some 300,000 years ago, there were at least 5 others. And if you are going to place a bet on which of these, Neanderthals, Homo erectus and the others, would outlast all the rest, you might not have put your money on us. So why only humans survive? Many explanations have been put forward: brain power, language, or just luck. Now a new idea is building momentum to explain our dominance. Ironically, it may be some of our seemingly deepest vulnerabilities: being dependent on others, feeling compassion, and experience empathy. That could have given us the edge. So we are today here as Homo sapiens because we have collaborated and cooperated with each other. And this is precisely the idea of our network. This is why I'm confident that we will succeed, because all our region, I think, depends on these kind of initiatives. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Polyak.
Çok teşekkürler Sayın Belediye Başkanı.
If there is no more contribution, oh, all right then. Could you please press the button?
Düğmeye basabilir misiniz lütfen?
The floor is yours.
Buyurun efendim, söz sizde.
First of all, I would like to thank the professor for this inspiring lecture.
Profesöre teşekkür etmek
I will
istiyorum.
not take much
İlham veren
of the time just to share
konuşma için
one
çok
of
fazla
my
vaktinizi almak
thoughts
istemiyorum. Sadece
on
birkaç
which I am
düşüncemi
inspired
paylaşmak
by
istedim.
the Mayor Imanoglu
Sayın
speech.
İmamoğlu'nun da konuşması bana ilham
As
verdi
you
bu
said
noktada.
that
Sizin de belirttiğiniz gibi
the transparency and
şeffaflık
open platforms
ve
that
açık
can
platformlar
make people participate in democracy will
insanların
change our
demokrasiye
point of view on all the
katılımını
processes.
sağlayan platformlar
think
aslında
that
bizim perspektifimizi de değiştiriyor
while
ve
we are
süreçlerimizi
speaking
değiştiriyor. Şimdi biz bugün
out there
konuşurken
is whole new generations
yepyeni bir nesilden
using
de
the
bahsediyoruz
technology
aslında.
at the
Teknolojiden faydalanıyorlar
way
kendileri.
and in the manner that we in this room cannot imagine.
Salonda hayal
They
edemeyeceğimiz araçlardan faydalanıyorlar.
24 hours a day
Bir
online.
günde
They
24 saat
don't even
boyunca
now use
online,
the
çevrim içi
networks,
ortamlarda
social
bulunuyorlar.
networks that we
Sosyal
are used to.
ağlar,
They are
bizim
developing the
alışkın
new
olduğumuz
ones.
ağlar
They are
değiller.
contacting
Yeni ağlar
with each other on
geliştiriyorlar.
the new
Birbirleriyle temas
platforms.
halindeler, platformlar üzerinden.
And in the future,
Ve gelecekte
that process will just speed
bu
up,
süreç yalnızca
and that
hızlanacak.
will cause the
Yavaşlamayacak.
evolving, future
Ve
evolving of democracy.
Demokrasinin
It will not
değişen
be
yüzünü de, geleceğini de
possible
bu tesis edecek, teşkil
for
edecek.
those who have the power,
Ve
either economic or
gerek
political
ekonomik
power,
güce sahip
to
olsunlar, gerek siyasi
suppress
güce sahip
that kind
olsunlar,
of processing information,
güce sahip
transforming
olanların
information.
buna etki etme gücü olmayacak. Yani
in my
bilgiyi
opinion,
dönüştüremeyecekler ve bilgiye müdahale
the
edemeyecekler.
main reason
Bence
for the optimism for the future of
gelecekle
democracy and
ilgili ve
for the
demokrasinin
the
geleceğiyle
further
ilgili asıl iyimserlik
developing of
aslında
democratic
ve
processes is
demokratik
just
süreçlerin
about that.
geliştirilmesiyle ilgili
It's
asıl
in the
iyimserlik bununla ilişkili.
point where the young people
Yani gençler
will get used to sharing information
bilgi
and
paylaşmaya giderek alışacaklar.
that processes will
Ve bu
just speed up,
süreçler
and the people with the power
hızlanacak. İnsanlar aslında güce sahip olacak.
anti-democratic intention will
Demokratik
never
olmayan niyetler ise
catch them up anymore.
asla ayak uyduramayacaklar
I'm out of
bunlara.
time, sorry.
Zamanım da doldu. Kusura bakmayın.
Mayor, you're always really kind about timing. Thank you so much. And the
teşekkürler
point
Sayın
you stated is
Başkan.
really valuable.
Belirttiğiniz
That's why we
noktalar
are
çok
also
değerli
really
noktalar
optimistic.
aslında. O yüzden gerçekten
Has
iyimseriz
any
burada.
mayor- Right, just
Başka
could you
belediye
mind,
başkanı.
please?
Buyurun efendim.
Thank you very much. I will talk in Romanian.
Çok
I
teşekkürler.
would
Ben
like,
Rumence konuşacağım.
vreau să-l felicit pe domnul
Romence konuşacağım.
I will
Öncelikle
talk in Romanian.
Sayın Sayın Başkanın söylediği gibi, Sayın
As
Ekrem İmamoğlu'nun da söylediği gibi
the mayor
gerçekten
said,
çok büyük bir cesaret göstergesi gerçekten.
this is a great
Herkesin dinlemesi ve onların
act of power and courage.
fikirlerini dinlemek ve o fikirleri hayata geçirmek çok büyük bir cesaret göstergesidir. Gerçekten
Implementing
bu
these
şekilde,
decisions is also a great
davranmanız çok büyük bir cesaret
indicator
göstergesi. Sizi tebrik
of your
ediyorum.
courage. The fact that you're doing it and expressing that is a great
About the things that you said about
indicator.
courage. Any mayor
Çok
who would like
teşekkürler
to?
bu cesaretle ilgili
I think
söylediğiniz
that's
şeylerin.
fine. But it was really fruitful discussion, and thank you so much for all the
faydalı bir
contributions.
tartışma oldu. Bütün katkılar
Honorable
için
mayors,
teşekkürler.
dear guests,
Saygıdeğer
now I would
belediye
like to invite you
başkanları,
to the mapping show on the exhibition area to promote the cooperation between
katılımcılar,
B40
şimdi
cities.
B40
After the mapping show, our mayors will have their bilateral meetings between until 12:30. Then we will move on to the lunch. After the lunch, we will gather in the same room to review the presentation on the outcomes of the technical sessions. Now I would like to invite you, esteemed guests, to the mapping show area.